welcome everybody. I'm so excited to see so many of you here tonight. This is amazing. My name is Becky Latuca. I'm the Executive Director here at the Center. I hope you're enjoying the exhibit, Paper, an Enduring Medium, curated by Gibby Waitskin, Distinguished Artist of the Year. All of us here at the Center have had the distinct pleasure of working very closely with Gibby over the past few months as she's turned her vision for this amazing exhibition into an actual the display you see here today. So it's been an incredible pleasure. We've really enjoyed it. In just a few minutes, Gibby's going to come up here, or sit there, and tell you just a little bit about what she did, how she put the show together, what her thought process was. And then she's also going to introduce you to the artists, the other featured artists here. And I know that you're all eager to hear from all of them, probably more so than you are to hear from me. So I will keep it as brief as I can, and then turn things back over to Gibby. Before I do, though, there are a few things I'd like to mention. First, while you're here, please be sure to visit the exhibits downstairs. We have Mutualism by Radford artist Langley Anderson. That exhibit is also closing today, just like the one up here. And then we also have the Floyd County High School Art Show on display in the Breezeway. That just got installed the other day, so it will be here for a couple months, but it's well worth a visit, and we've missed having them here as well. So we also want you to take a few minutes to visit the building right across the driveway here, right next door to us, the Appalachian Center for Photography. Pretty soon, that's going to be fully opened, and when it is, it will be a combination history museum, art gallery, and hands-on learning center for all things related to film photography.
Who started that?
Well, I was just going to answer that. So while you're there, make sure to say hello to Dr. Russell Young. He really is the driving force behind that operation. It is absolutely due to his extensive knowledge about film photography, the tools, the techniques, the art form, and the people, combined with his dedication of really sharing that knowledge with the world, with all of you, that will make it possible for us to have such an amazing resource here in Floyd, Virginia. So absolutely stop and say hello to him, take a look at the gallery and things. It is still a work in progress, but it's amazing. And I have to say, I'm both humbled and honored to be able to work with him on that project. It's coming along nicely. The next thing I'd like to say is thank you. Just thank you to all of you for being here. I've really missed this. I mean, it's been, this is our first reception in 16 months, so it's incredible. It is so wonderful to have all of you here with us, have all of the artists here speaking about their work. This is just incredible. I don't need to tell you how trying the past 16 months have been. We've all lived through it. We all have, as individuals and collectively, our highs and lows over that time. But what I would like to tell you is how inspiring it has been to be able to be here and working during that time. In the midst of the pandemic, we were able to work with artists and art lovers like all of you to continue to fulfill our mission to support creative endeavors in our rural community in a variety of new ways. There were definitely some hiccups along the way. We worked partially remotely, partially on site. We transitioned into these amazing virtual experiences. We figured out how to offer some kids programming to go. We're working on more of that, and we're very excited to also welcome the children back into the center in events like this as well. Overall, the center staff and volunteers just did an incredible job, and so grateful for all of that. And they kept the arts available in our region in every way they could. So many of the people who have walked through our doors and those who have visited virtually have really made a point of stopping and thanking us for being here and for doing this. And that's amazing. I mean, they stopped and thanked us for doing something that we already love doing. So we were as grateful for them as they were for us, or as thankful to all of you. Whoops. Anyways, we really couldn't have done any of it without all of your support. So I just really do. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of it. Along those lines, on Wednesday, June 23rd, the Art Center is participating in the Community Foundation of the New River Valley's Give Local Day of Giving. event, and that Give Local is designed to support New River Valley nonprofit organizations such as this one, to allow us to help continuing doing the important work that we all do. So before I hand the podium over to the table, the bistro table, over to Gibby. The podium was buried in a closet. It's been, like I said, 16 months, so. So before I hand things over to Gibby, I would like to ask each of you to think about how important the arts are to you. You know, in times of joy and in times of hardship, it does seem that we've really turned to the arts. So I do ask that any time between now and June 23rd that you consider giving what you can in support of the Art Center and Give Local, so that we can continue to provide creative experiences just like the one that we're having here tonight. And so, that's probably enough from me. I do want to mention that Kate Skelly, who is the Center's new Director of Programming, will be moderating the panel discussion that we have here this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Gibby, and she's going to introduce all of our artists, and then Kate has some questions that were previously submitted, and she'll also ask all of you if you have any questions for our artists. So, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to ask all of you to join me in welcoming the Floyd Center for the Arts Distinguished Artist of the Year and Guest Curator, Gibby Wainskin.
Thank you, Becky. I first of all want to thank everybody. There's several board members here this evening, the staff, Kate and I, Jesse, Becky, and Marie's not here. Through everything, trying to get all this together, I cannot believe what this team of people do with nothing. And so I just want you to know that I agree with Becky. Give Local, every penny you give really goes a long way here. So know that. It's really, really important. Anything that I asked, people just were, helping me with anything. And the person who's not here tonight is your technical guy. Website, I don't know if you've seen the website, it's amazing. Brandon is got to be the most brilliant kid. I would say, so Brandon, what I was thinking. And then the next day he goes, Kitty, I just want to show you something. And I'd go in there and he would just blow me away. So a really unique experience. So thank all of you. The show tonight, I have been telling many of the people here on this panel that I've always wanted to do a show with the people that I got to do the show with. So when I was asked to be distinguished artist and to curate this show, I was like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do. Because these four women I have met through my paper journey. Georgia and I met in Washington. Shar I met through her brother who was here for many years, Kurt Steger, a sculptor who had an office downstairs. Got to really get to know Shar and her husband, Doug. Nicole and Bryant came to a workshop that I did at Meredith that Rhonda Wilkerson helped us set up when I had my show there. And they walk in and, I'm watching these two women in this fiber studio and they are not doing anything that anybody else is doing. And then I went, who are you guys? And the rest is really history. But you've got the little brochure that tells a little bit about each artist, but every one of us you see, we're all educators, and we all give back a lot. And I think in terms of the medium we work with, it is very unique, it is really special, and we have been able over the years they've been able to work in colleges, universities, but doing workshops all over the country. It really is amazing to see what people do with paper. And I wanted people to go in there and have just a hint of what is possible. Because I think it's a medium that people don't really, what is this? What are you doing? So that's what I really wanted to do here. I've had amazing number of people come through, which I've been really, really pleased about. There have been some really nice talks that the center's set up for me to do with some groups with masks. And tonight is the first night we've been in here. I must admit, Jesse, I did not recognize you because I only know you with a mask. So it was like, I looked down and went, oh, Jesse, oh, the eyes, you know. I mean, you know, to work with somebody for months and never see their face. So it's been a journey. And last, I want to, as this show's coming down, even though I get to continue doing demos and workshops, but also I have a new piece downstairs. I know you saw the big boat downstairs. And I wanted just to encourage everybody. I'm going to read what I wrote here. The name of it is All Boats Rise and Sink Together. All boats rise and sink together is a variation of an ancient Chinese proverb, a rising tide lifts all boats. The boat is a metaphor I've used and many of the artists here have used throughout this body of work to symbolize our collective journey towards a just and healthy society. We may sail on different boats and our journeys may be slightly different, but we all need to understand and accept we are all in this together. And I really would like you to contribute your experience or hope for the future in a brief message. I've put some handmade paper downstairs for you to write on and drop in the boat. And what I've been really pleased is I thought people were going to fold them all up, but people have left them open so you can read what people are writing. And it's really quite moving. And so I'm hoping all of you, and if you don't have time to finish it, take the paper. I've had 2 people mail me back their pieces that they had gotten from me at a workshop. So please, please write about your journey, how you feel now that we're all back, I think, together again. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kate, and she's going to ask, and I said enough, and I told them that. So.
Thank you, Gibby. So for the first question, I'm just going to go down the line. So you'll be on the spot first, Brian, because you're sitting next to me.
I was going to be last. I was working on last.
But then for the final 2 that I have here, we'll open it up to the group. And then after that, we'll open it up to the people here if they have questions. So the first one is, can you each tell me a little bit about your process and how it's evolved over the years? And can you share something that you're currently working on that you're excited about? So, Brian.
I was born to be a hunter and gatherer. I've been making things since I ever possibly could and figuring out how things might be put together. And, so I'm a hunter and gatherer. I'm always making things. I came into paper making sideways because I was attracted to Gibby because of the dyes, because I'm very inspired by the animals, and I grew into somebody that wants to, I was trying to make the animals that I saw in the world around me. That's one of the things I do, natural dyes. Animals kind of have their own natural dyes, you know, and then paper has been a real gift to me, and I saw my first heron flying over Gibby's Lake. The other thing that I do is I make large-scale installations with stuff that we normally throw away, like maybe 10,000 plastic bottles, et cetera, et cetera. I have a strong urge to deal with what we're doing in the world, but you can't point your finger. So I've been collecting and trying to make beautiful things out of stuff that we use once and throw away. I'm driving up to Maine today, and what I can do there is collect all some rope from some dumps that I know, because I'm having an installation at Green Hill in Greensboro about water. It's called H2O. And so never mind about fishing rope and why it gets thrown away, but it does. And it's really good if it ends up in the dump rather than in the sea. Anyway, I've got a lot of things to say about a lot of things, but here I am. Bye.
I started as I considered myself a backyard paper maker. My first was made out of like a door screen, and I just made sheets for books and friends, and didn't really take it to a serious level till I took my first class with Karen Stoliker, who was at the time a papermaker out of Alaska, although I think she's now here in Seattle. I think she's now still a papermaker. So that took me, and I saw what you could really do with paper. So then I took another class at Aramont that took it to 3D level, which was with Joe Steely, and then I've just never really turned back. It's gone sculptural and then installations, and now I'm currently working on welding my armatures. Up until now I've just been working with wire that I can twist myself, but I wanted to go big and didn't want it to hurt anybody, so I figured I'd have to weld my armatures. So now I'm welding my armatures, and I'm working on they're about 6 feet high wishbones that will be put at Sika in August. So I'm working on it. Okay, there you go. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, my background is actually in textiles and specifically weaving, but I minored in printmaking, and I always wanted to get the two things together. So I was sewing on my prints, I was cutting up my prints and putting them in the weaving, but commercial paper doesn't work very well for that. So I decided I got to learn how to make paper. And the fibers are kind of the same, so it was a natural evolution. So I did start making paper, taking some workshops and just figuring it out. Then I discovered paper can be three-dimensional. And it was all over at that point. Started molding paper and doing sculpture and figuring out different ways to combine it with my fibers, because I will always be a fiber artist. But I also love picking up things in the forest, like a seed pod or a leaf or something, and somehow incorporating that into the art to really show people how beautiful those things are. So that's a major part of my work. What I'm working on now, I'm really excited about, is 2 years ago I had the opportunity to go to Ecuador and trek the Amazon rainforest and work with some of the indigenous people there. So now I'm working on a show about that, and that will be all paper, because it just seems like that's the media that will express how that rainforest is being destroyed, because paper's very ephemeral and yet it's very strong. So that's what I'm working on.
And we're going to be in a show.
Yes, I'm
She's
curating
great.
a show that Gibby will be a major part of, and that's also all about paper. So I have 12 paper artists that will participate in that.
Up in Columbia.
Columbus, Ohio.
I look at the show in there, so I'm the flat person, all my work is flat. I've taught for 38 years, and my training is as a printmaker, but like a lot of printmakers, and I was always collaging papers in and just wanted more control, and that led to making my paper for my prints. But I've stayed infatuated with that for all these years. I started making paper in the 70s. That dates me. But I love the possibilities when print processes are combined with handmade paper. And it's just, because it kept me focused in that. I did have a stint in the three-dimensional experimentation and work back in the late 80s. But anyway, I've gone back to working the way I do it. It is multiple fine art print media, etching, lithography. A lot of these are screen printing on handmade paper, because it allowed me no longer to be dependent on a printing press. I could work and make really large screen prints on paper. So that's kind of the way I've drifted. But they're all one-of-a-kind pieces. I'm no longer interested in editioning prints, and I like print media, and what I'm really particularly interested in is the softness and diffuse quality of the handmade paper combined with the specificity of the traditional print processes. So I really like those, and I've always felt they're really akin to what memory is, where things are out of focus and things are in sharp focus. So I just continue to work this way. And I got to know Gibby in Washington at the Corcoran, and when she retired, I suggested she make paper would be a good thing because she has such a strong graphic sensibility too, and then she took off in this other direction. So this is what I like about the medium. People just have moved in so many ways to find their voices in 3D, 2D, it's really exciting process. So, Gibby.
Well, I'm going to be in a show with Shar up in Columbus, not Columbia. But I really, I'm working with the Girl Scouts throughout this year. So when you start seeing handmade holiday cards, bookmarks, all these things for sale, they're for their big trip to Disneyland or wherever. But I've set up this whole side area for the Girl Scout troop. And they've come out with their parents, and now their parents all want to learn how to make paper. So, but I have this set up for them for the next 4 months. They're going to be doing that, so that's very exciting. I'll be doing a workshop. The Jacksonville Center is sponsoring my workshop in September, so if anybody's interested, let me know. And I've got grandchildren finally coming to Service Ferry, so that's very exciting. So. And getting back to this place, it's a truly unique place. We're very blessed to have it. And I think everybody in this room knows that, but I want to reinforce that.
Okay, so the next question I'm opening up just to anyone who wants to speak first. How has the pandemic impacted your working process? If at all.
Nicole, you should say something.
Yeah, I get to, I mostly, my topics, or I mostly kind of take botanicals, obviously, and but it was my first foray a little bit into social justice, just because of what was going on with all the unrest, and so that olive branch was kind of coming out of that, because I think we should extend, an olive branch to each other instead of guns, I guess. But there's 19 leaves in it for COVID-19, and there's 3 black olives, or Black Lives Matter. So, and just the fragility of the olive branch and just the olive trees. And we're losing a lot of them in Italy, and so there's a lot of that into play about protect the environment, protect our world, be kind to one another. So that piece was made during COVID, and it gave me something, to really focus on when I couldn't be at the riots. I couldn't be there in support where I lived, so I thought that was a way I could support the movement through art.
Well, I can speak to that. I think the biggest effect was that I really hunkered down in my studio, which is in my home, so I didn't have to go anywhere. But that was kind of where I wanted to focus, not on the news, not on what was going on, just really in the studio making art. So it really increased my production. I think one of the negative things was not being able to see my artist friends and exchange ideas, not be able to go to galleries. So that was detrimental. But I think overall, I'm almost guilty saying this, but I had a positive experience in the studio.
And I'll just say, I had the opposite. I was really not able to do work this past year. I was anxious about a lot of things. We have a daughter in New York City and a brother, and I just felt we lost a family member, and so to me, I wasn't able to focus. It was the complete opposite, and I kept thinking, I'm wasting all this time. But it was only kind of toward the end, when being in the studio, I'd go there and I'd sit in there, and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. But it helped me kind of rethink the studio with the help of my husband, Tom Ashcraft, who's a sculptor and artist himself. We redesigned my studio and realized, and I'd only recently moved into that studio, so I think a lot of it was the growing pains of trying to work in a new place. But then I became really productive late spring. But I also think, knowing myself, it takes a long time for me to process a situation. Several of those works out there followed 9/11, and what happened to me personally. We lost 5 of our neighbors in the Pentagon, and it was like 2 years after before I could make that work. And so I kind of feel I'm starting to process now this past year.
I agree with you. I mean, I would go into the studio and I look around and I go, you know, this is, you know, I can't be working. I mean, it was, you know, it felt like a luxury to have, you know, this beautiful space to, you know, I need to be doing something. You know, and again, you know, thinking about our family, friends, and you know, Buzz was downstairs zooming away because at Duke he was one of the first people to start teaching online, and so he would go down like for 8-10 hours a day, and I was like becoming, you know, the little chef in the kitchen. But the studio, I was just, I felt like it was too much of a luxury. And then when Becky said she wanted to meet with me, I went, oh, you do? Distinguished artist, what, you know? And it was like something woke up in me. I mean, because I felt there was a part of me that had stopped. It had stopped. And, oh, you want me to curate a show? Oh, yeah, you know, and it's like, I was like off to the races. And once I got in the studio, it was very interesting because I realized that I'd had a show at Hollins, and you know, and some of that work is there, the Truth Continuum. But what I realized about the process of being in the studio for the artist is, yeah, we are so blessed because you start working, and then, you know, for me, and I think for everybody here, there's a high. There's this incredible moment where you are just in this work and your mind is thinking, and the work starts playing in to your idea. I mean, with paper, and especially with the fibers I work with, I'll have an idea, but it will definitely go another place, and I go, oh, I like this. I like where this is going. And that's what happened for me. It got me through the holidays, and then, like you said, starting in January, February, and it made me understand how important, if you have any kind of work you like doing, whether it's writing like Randall does, Susie's incredible blogging and book journals, whatever you have, Don's incredible woodworking, you know, those mediums are, you know, a vehicle for us to just have these incredible moments that we get to have making art. And it's a blast. We're blessed with that. You know, I think it's truly amazing that we can have that vehicle to have in our life.
And I want to talk about the animals.
Yeah.
And you've probably heard about the animals coming out in places because we were
Yes.
not coming out.
Yeah.
I felt like this was a time of huge grief for all the struggles that are happening in the world. I was a poll watcher. I was all these things that I could be when I could be. It's terribly scary times. But I was always aware that there were animals in my neighborhood, in my suburban neighborhood. I saw the rabbits and watching the birds. Who was I talking about watching the birds? And I just discovered juncos. I was in the mountains, and there were juncos on somebody's snowy front porch. They're called snowbirds. And then I started reading Drew Lanham, The Home Place. Please read his book, an ornithologist about
What is it?
The Home Place by Drew Lanham. One earth, one sky, one soil, us. We're the same.
Yeah.
We're all, that rabbit and me and you and the birds, we're in the same place, and it just made me feel that here we all are. So I discovered the junco in all juncos, but I'm just amazed that the birds can live with all we do for the earth. And every day I go out and hear them in the trees, and I'm like, there they are. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. So I was aware, and I have big grief, but also from the grief you make art.
Yeah. Yeah.
It helped me during the pandemic because I was invited to be a guest editor of Hand Paper Making magazine. And so I had to kind of gather all these writers, these artists from around the country who do prints on handmade paper. And listening to everybody's stories for a full year while editing this magazine, it was like frightening, but really also consoling that it was, what everybody was going through. And I had, she was a printer at Pace Editions in New York, and she said she couldn't even get in the studio and have access to her files to finish her article. So she says, all I do is bike around Manhattan every day. She was in this place, and someone else, another artist, lost a husband. And just listening to everybody's stories of what they could and couldn't do and how they made it through it, they were, unfortunately familiar, sometimes consoling, because some people were incredibly productive, and but just having to work with all these different artists was really interesting how this kind of was, just this kind of overlying theme for everybody, and talking about their work or their inability to do work. And it was an interesting, thing. Looking back on it, the time was kind of panicky because we kept thinking, this issue might not come together, this might not happen, and it's supposed to go to press, because everybody, I had a woman who was a conservator at the Harvard Spog Museum, and she couldn't get it at any of the things she was trying to photograph for her article or conservation article. So, we just had all these situations. They were all very, very different. But, we were all in, like Gibby says, all in the boat. We were rising and falling together,
Yeah. Okay, so one last question from me. Many recent articles have noted that people are now being drawn to craft as an antidote to digital media. Do you see papermaking as an antidote to too much technology? Do you see this current interest in craft as something that will be enduring?
I can't speak for papermaking per se, and I didn't papermake at home, but I did do Zoom workshops where I invited people to bring their old T-shirts and anything they had, and to wrap them and make things out of them. I called it Angels and Animals because I saw a seven-eyed seraphim, in a cathedral, in an old church in Spain. Like, oh wow, there's seven-eyed creatures around. Anyway, just figure something out. And I did many workshops that way, and each one was a community of people that found out that they could do something when they didn't think they could.
Right.
And they didn't have to go to the store to do it. And so I felt that was community. And I think if you feel like that you can make something, figure something out, then you can take the next more difficult step all the time. And I think it's really important. And I think that as artists, we sort of know that. And once you figure something out, you've got to take another difficult step. But that's why we teach too. And that's why you figure out how to hang that picture or whatever it is you're figuring out. I know you're figuring stuff out all the time where you live. It's being a human being.
I think the pandemic had an effect on that too, because people kind of slowed down.
Yep.
They had to fill their time. They found things to do with their hands and discovered that this is a really cool thing. So I think there was an effect there. I hope that will endure.
Yeah, there was a conference this February called Book, Paper, Thread, and it was for people who work in those media. And they were trying to kind of launch their the workshops. It was in Atlanta, North Carolina. And so they asked me to do a demo, and a number of people around the country. And they said, we expect about 200 people to get on this Zoom conference, but it was free. So, I said, well, anything free, you might expect more people. 2,000 people got on from the UK, South America, Africa, and I think just everybody was so starved for finding community. And again, I think people just, like you said, want that haptic experience, and the hands-on thing was very comforting, during all this. I've seen a move back anyway, just having taught so many years. We always had students in the digital classes just dying to get back and make a book. I'd always have to say, you've got to get out of class. There's another group coming in here, your time is up, and they would say, it's so great to work with my hands again, because they said, I'm in front of a computer screen all day. So I think there was a movement back anyway. but.
That was already happening.
It was already happening, but I think this, like you said, people slowed down, people were at home, and they were eating up whatever they could get, online and learn.
But more and more, our departments are eliminating, those hands-on arts and going more with graphics and digital technology. So it is, I think, a reaction, swinging back,
Developmentally, you need to do the repetitive process to learn to read. Sewing, all the things you do in homesteading, the repetitive process prepares your brain to learn. And when I go into schools and do weaving like a bird with little kids, the boys can't stop. They can't get enough of it, and it's a developmental need. And that's why you couldn't get them out of your classroom. It's like, I'm really, really hungry for this, and I'm starved.
Yeah.
So it's a necessity, I feel like.
Great, so now I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience, if anybody has a question.
Yes. Art, despite the pandemic, art about the pandemic. I mean, I myself, in my own little amateur thing, I sent things out to my aunts, not my ancestors, but my descendants, in my journal, and to all my friends, several of them. And I included something that Dennis had written. He wrote about the pandemic every month or so. And I called it the pandemic pantograph. And I call it art and photographs. It was some attempt to reckon with it, understand it. The pandemic brought that forth, about bringing art forth out of the pandemic. Any thoughts? Instead of the pandemic squelching it, evoking it. Do you?
I'm going to kind of echo what Georgia said, that it took years to process 9/11.
Oh.
And I think it's going to be several years before
Yeah.
it's going to show up in our artwork.
But it'll never be the same, I think, because of, yeah.
Right.
There's some sort of millennium change thing going on. I don't know, I don't really follow that stuff. But yeah, I think we're basically, we all know something different that we never knew before from going through this year. Your experience was different than mine, but it was profound. We have a lot in common
But
that we never had before.
has done her boats, which are timely, socially constructive and commentary, right? So it's not necessarily a pandemic, but social things and political brought forth their boats, launched them.
And I'm hoping, like the piece in there that I think of, the boats of many colors. That's a piece that's lined with the colors of the rainbow for obvious reasons. And Buzz and I were on this boat in New York Harbor and during a huge storm. And it was a schooner, and they said, oh, you have to go down below. And I go, what? And we get down there, and it's, there are these little portholes, and I'm just about to lose it, and there are like 10 people down there, and we're going back and forth in the harbor, and the only thing I can see when we go by was the Statue of Liberty. And I had this point and shoot, just a little point and shoot, but that imagery really came to me during this period of unrest, that we have this symbol that many of us look at, and there's, I use a lot of symbolism in my colors and the objects. Each feather means something, like the duck feather means community. So all you people that love ducks, ducks mean community for a reason. So I think that it's going to grow. I think it's going to grow. I think the conversations, I just was in Austin with our family, with our grandchildren, and our son and his wife. Our conversations with them were totally different than they were last year when they were able to come up to the farm. And really on another level, just in terms of what they want in their life and for their children, a depth that is amazing. Yeah. And they say that the world is not going to go back. We'll see, but I hope there can be some more good change.
speaking of your farm, it's just a warning to people that we went to buy a bookmark and spent something like $1,500 on a naked person in the sink.
Yeah, Rhonda and Joe know about those naked people. Yeah.
I have a question, but first I have to explain where it's coming from. As I've mentioned to some of you tonight, I read this incredible book called The Master and His Emissary, and it's about our evolution as humans with left and right brain development and changes. You know, we first start talking and then we actually decide to write symbols to translate that in another, you know, those different spaces of our evolution as humans have been amazing to see from this psychologist that wrote the book. But the true master, according to the writer, is the right brain. And it's because that creative side of us sees the bigger picture, which you all know about. And the importance of allowing that creative thinking, like in my own personal experience, I was studying science education and I ended up becoming a potter, But it happened because I was just playing in the studio and not taking it seriously, and I invent a form of, you know, I call it the gathered planter, that ended up changing my life, which to this day I'm still the only one in the world that makes them. And that kind of exploration is the thing that I see personally, you know, again, literally changed my life, sent me here to Floyd, and allowed me to be who I am and even be part of getting this art center together. But the big challenge, and this is what I want to ask you all about, is how to give it that strength and recognition of art in the schools, in the regular schools. Because art isn't just about that painting on the wall. Art is a whole development of our brain, and the way you work with the paper required both sides, left and right, how to be creative thinker and also get it done in a way that works. So it's usually, you know, that combination is something that our educational system doesn't really honor or recognize, and the importance of allowing kids to learn art in a way that isn't defined in the way traditionally we do define it as this, you know, so many people think of just art museums and, you know, big recognition for painting and stuff. No, it's on all levels of our life. So I'm wondering if you have any ideas of how we can kind of help and make those changes in our whole understanding of education as humans. Good question.
I hate to be first again. First of all, pay the teachers twice as much.
Yes.
Because they need to be
They are the most
doing their
important
job
people.
and having a second job.
Absolutely.
And I've been on other panels recently, and this passionate type of question has come up at the end every time, and it's a cry. It's a cry, and the answer is huge. I don't really have it, but it just flashed on me a little bit here that one thing that we can teach the students is the skills. You know, the skills to make, so that they can have those experiences that you have. And that just came to me, because from wondering. Thank you.
I see it also coming back as an influencer, believe it or not, from the business community, wanting, you know, the design thinking, the creative thinking, and asking that, and going to certain programs, certain people to know that if we're going to get out of the fix we're in, if we're going to solve climate change, if we're going to make healthcare really work, all the things, you know, the environment, you know, we've got to do some real, like you said, right brain creative thinking. And I think that I have a little hope there, is that we're seeing the business community gravitate that. Even the VCs, as we were talking to Graham, there are people that really want to invest in this. They want to invest big. They know they've got to make a big change. And I think it starts with where you're saying. But if there's any place, first one to get cut in the budget is always art program, art, music, what, you know. So I think bringing kids in here, just like watching these kids from the Girl Scout troop and their parents, and I couldn't get them to leave. I mean, they were supposed to come by for like 30 minutes, and an hour and a half later, they were still in the studio asking me questions. So it wasn't just the kids, it was the parents. And so I think any way that we can offer those kind of creative thinking, that creative thinking, if someone's making art, that creative thinking is going to help a kid downstream no matter what the work he's doing is doing.
And you're giving him the skills, though.
Exactly.
The skills to express themselves.
Yeah.
I've seen you do it.
It is interesting, I do have to share, when many of us first moved here, this was 40 years ago to me, it was the local high school art teacher that recognized we were, and this was Catherine Polly, for those who know, recognized that we were artists. Now, I had never taken an art class. I just did the hands-on clay thing. And she invited us to do a little sculpture exhibit for her old church gallery, which she had going at the time. And I thought, what? But then I happened to go to the African Museum of Art in Washington and saw the most incredible sculpture, and they had never had an art class. And they made these amazing images and things, so that gave me permission. And that was, again, one of my experiences of being given the invitation and the kind of inner permission to explore that part of myself. And she brought that out in me in a way that I had never experienced before. And I think any one of us could do that. We don't have to be an art teacher, you know, and just to honor that with our kids and grandkids and things like for many of us now. But just anybody we run into. And again, that's why we started this art center, was to try to encourage everybody, you know. You don't have to be the artist to exhibit, you know. You could just be whatever and what your expression is. And so what you all are doing is just phenomenal, because again, it's an inspiration to that creative working with these amazing textures and things. I just want to thank you so much. It's awesome.
Like 15 years, I've been impressed with the Floyd Center for the Arts and what they do for kids. Yay.
Yeah.
And I hope, you know, now that we're getting through this pandemic year, some of the programs that I've observed that they've offered will be able to continue. As an example, we have our 2 adopted grandkids here in Floyd, and Archer particularly, who's, you know, bright in math and bright in so many other ways, went to Open Studio to learn pottery. So I have several pieces, little butter dishes, vases, sponge holders, and things that I've had him make for me. But it was like an exposure that I think he would have never had, because he's a really sound student with probably engineering or a doctor or something in his future. And then they've had after-school programs, which I think are particularly valuable, because the kids have some place worthwhile to go after school and get exposed to any other medium that the center might have to offer. So I don't know what it's going to take to be able to continue those programs, but I hope that it will.
I do see a problem with the children because they want to touch, knock over. My grandson wanted to knock over birds so badly. But I got a gorgeous picture of him reaching up to touch Gibby's, was it a leaf, Fred? Or what?
Yeah.
It's just like, it should be hanging on the wall. It's art. My daughter said it's art. But I talked to folks about it, and they said, we don't encourage all the children to come up, because I can hear things crashing. I don't think there's a solution to that. I don't know. But one thing that the art center did was to have a show put on by the Montessori school. I came in here, I mean, It was amazing, all these, talk about creativity, right here. You know, things on tables, it was like Dr. Seuss on drugs. Things that they had made, all these little towns and so forth. So, I mean, this would have been illegal when I was a boy. I mean, so I commend the Art Center for doing that.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you.